Warning: Fazbear Entertainment warns consumers that the following video contains references to and abstract depictions of subjects that may upset some viewers. Just like any good employee should do in their night shift, proceed with caution. With that out of the way, grab some delicious pizza, watch your back, remember that we are not responsible for death, dismemberment, or injury, and enjoy the show. Five Nights at Freddy's World is, without a doubt, one of the stranger games to come out of the FNAF franchise, and I'm not alone when I say this. Even though the game is tons of fun, back when it first released in 2016, not everyone appreciated the fact that this game didn't have any horror elements in it. Heck, even Markiplier didn't play it. And you know it's bad when Markiplier doesn't play it. However, while this game might not be in the same vein as the other FNAF games in the series, it still has tons of lore hidden inside it that practically no one has ever talked about, which is why today I present to you the definitive guide to Five Nights at Freddy's World, going over everything from the puppet being a secret mastermind to how a forgotten Scott Cawthon character is plotting to destroy the entire FNAF franchise. And since I myself didn't know much about this mysterious game before jumping into its lore, I've got someone to help me and you figure out the lore of FNAF World, fellow FNAF Theory YouTuber Narrow Raven. But hey, if you're already a FNAF World expert and are only here for the lore reveals and my opinions on them, this video is chaptered, so watch however you want to. However, do remember that it's all just a theory and that you are allowed to disagree. With that, Raven, take it away.
Hello everyone, thanks for inviting me onto this episode, Withered. So, before we get into what I have in store for this recap of FNAF World, I'm going to explain how this is going to be laid out so it's easier to follow. I'm going to have this split into 3 sections. The normal story, which will cover the base game, no Easter eggs, just from beginning to end. Then I will cover the lore story, which is essentially the story with Easter eggs, such as the clocks. Lastly, I will cover the Halloween Desk Man. So let's first get into the normal story of FNAF World. So, the story for FNAF World normally is quite simple. As you start the game for the first time, you get a cool cutscene of 2 yellow eyes speaking to you, telling you essentially to be careful, as something is wrong and everything that happens out there has an effect here. After this, you're at the start menu and you can begin your adventure here. Once you choose your difficulty, you can choose your characters and play. The first thing that happens is you speak to Fredbear, who gives you an introduction as to where you are and what you have to do. In the normal story of the game, not really much happens. All you're told is to find some glitchy objects and not to go down to the 4th sublevel, and you'll be fine. You're also told to activate the switches to confront the security owl later in the game. As you do this, you fight many bosses, from a giant snowman, a giant octopus, a very creepy and gross eyeball monster thing, and many more gigantic things along the way. Once you activate the switches by finding a key from one of these boss fights, you can confront the security owl. His fight is like any other, except with some cool new attacks that if you don't have a wall for yourself, you will die very quickly. Once you make your way past the security owl, you'll encounter one of 2 things depending on the difficulty you choose. If you choose the normal mode, you'll be told to play the game on hard mode to get the real ending. If you did choose the hard mode, you'll be able to fight Anim Dude, or as referred to here as the Storyteller. This fight is insane, but we're not here to discuss fight mechanics. If you beat the Storyteller, he'll yell at you, asking if this is what you really wanted and if it was all worth it, ending the story by killing the Storyteller. After this, he disintegrates and you have beaten the base game. However, if you go back, you'll find there's more than meets the eye. Now let's move on to the lore story. So the lore story of FNAF World is quite interesting. Remember how earlier when you start your adventure you talk to Fredbear? Well, under specific circumstances, out of the blue a glitch Fredbear appears, telling you that all the pieces are in place and that we just have to find them. These pieces are clocks around the map in different areas, each referring to something from previous FNAF games. For example, the code 395248 from FNAF 3. Each time you get to a certain point, this glitch Fredbear will give you hints onto where the next clock could be. There are 5 of these clocks in total. Once you get all 5, this glitch Fredbear tells you to get the key and ignore the guardians. Once you do this, if all the pieces are in place, a warp bubble will appear. Once you enter, you'll get 2 yellow dots as eyes, and some people talking to you through text. This is the same text with some differences that the crying child hears in FNAF 4 when everyone is saying their goodbyes to him. Specifically, "We are still your friends." Do you still believe that? All the pieces are in place for you. All you have to do is find them. Rest. After this, the game shows text that just says, "The end," and the game ends, and that is the ending. However, there's one more important character that we need to discuss. Though before I do discuss this one, just a quick warning for this one, as it does contain some subjects that some people may find uncomfortable. I'll give you a few seconds before we continue. Alright, so for this kind of character or ending, you have to beat Chica's magic rainbow in the Halloween update of the game. Once you do this, you'll be teleported into this man's home. Once you're in here, he gives you some dialogue. This dialogue goes as this. What are you doing here? Can't you see that I'm busy? You deactivated my games? I didn't know what else to do. I don't want to disappoint people, but my mind isn't right. I've made something terrible. Her name is Baby. It's too late to deactivate her. I'm sorry. Then the room goes black, and you can hear Circus Baby telling you that the show will begin momentarily, and to please stay in your seats.
The show will begin momentarily. Everyone, please stay in your seats.
The room becomes bright again, and the desk man presumably unalives himself or is unalived by Circus Baby, then giving you a message that says to be continued. That is the Halloween desk man ending. Now, take it away, Withered.
Thanks, Raven. So, now that we know all there is to know about the basic lore of FNAF World, what can we learn about this game that can help us solve the rest of the timeline? Wait, Withered, hold your horses. Isn't FNAF World quite literally a non-canon meta game? Well, in a way, yes, it is. But the amount of connection to the main story hidden across this game are actually impressive. So we're gonna focus primarily on the actual story-relevant parts of FNAF World, and not the meta parts that I think were added to hide the lore from us theorists. So, back to the video. First off, I think it's fitting to attempt to piece together who the player character of FNAF World is. The obvious answer is Freddy, but that's not what I mean. Rather, I think it's pretty clear FNAF World is some kind of spiritual landscape created to let the happiest day from FNAF 3 happen. Let me explain. Remember how Raven brought up that the clock ending is all about putting puzzles back together and that the last dialogue you see in game is "the pieces are in place for you"? Well, I think this connects to the happiest day for multiple reasons. First off, a lot of the dialogue in FNAF World explains how World is a safe place and a sanctuary for spirits, and that everything that happens out there has an effect in FNAF World. I think the Crying Child trophy we get after the clock ending is very strong evidence for the theory that we're putting the pieces together so that the happiest day we see in FNAF 3 can happen, and so the MCI is put to rest and the torment finishes. But who are we playing as here? Well, there's several options. The first, and most likely, is that our player character isn't anyone in particular. Glitchbear tells us early on in the game that we were made for one purpose, implying that whoever we're controlling isn't a specific spirit, but a random shell or tool created to make sure the pieces are in place for happiest day. There's also the idea that we're playing as Cassidy. The evidence for this arises from the Old Man Consequences minigame from FNAF World itself and Ultimate Custom Night. For those of you who don't know, both Ultimate Custom Night and FNAF World have an extremely similar Old Man Consequences ending, and you can drown in the lake he's fishing by in both games. If you drown in the lake in UCN, if you own World, you will automatically unlock the drowning achievement and ending in that game. Most people seem to agree that the bear we play as in UCN's version of the Old Man Consequences minigame is Cassidy, the spirit who goes into Golden Freddy, whether you believe she's the vengeful spirit or not. So, by that logic, since both minigame settings are the same and the player sprite is too, that should mean the bear we're playing as in this FNAF World ending is Cassidy. Right? As well as that, Cassidy has always had a very strong connection to Bite Victim, who FNAF World seems to be trying to free through Golden Freddy. After all, we get the Crying Child trophy after the clock ending, like I brought up earlier, and a lot of dialogue we get from the mysterious Yellow Eyes mimics dialogues from Night 6 of FNAF 4, where Crying Child dies. There's also the theory that we're playing as Crying Child, but since the whole game is about helping CC be free, it doesn't really make sense for him to be the player character. So who is it? Well, at least for now, I think the player character is just a random shell created by whoever's controlling FNAF World to make the clock ending happen and free the Bite Victim's soul. Which brings us to an even more important question. Who's even in charge of FNAF World? Well, I think the answer is pretty complicated, but actually kinda simple at the same time. To say it quickly, I think the spirit in charge of FNAF World is Charlotte Emily, or the daughter of Henry Emily, the co-founder of Fredbear Entertainment, who ends up possessing the puppet. Throughout the franchise, particularly FNAF 2, we see Charlotte giving gifts and giving life to the dead kids through the puppet by connecting their souls to the Freddy animatronics. We know FNAF World is heavily linked to FNAF 3 and the story of its happiest day minigames thanks to the evidence I brought up earlier, and since we know FNAF 3 is sort of where all the Fazbear Entertainment characters and merch ended up at one point or another, I think it's safe to assume Charlie came here to free the souls trapped in these objects and end everything. And we don't need to assume, because we have proof she did that. In FNAF 3, you can sometimes spot an intact puppet on Cam 11. It even has a reflection in the water on the floor, heavily implying it's real. This also ties in perfectly with Lefty from FNAF 6. After FNAF 3, Charlie would have escaped the fire at Fazbear's Fright and gotten caught by her father Henry's Lefty animatronic that we see in FNAF 6, explaining why the puppet is trapped in that animatronic in Pizzeria Simulator. However, there's still one important question to ask if what I just said is true. If FNAF World is being controlled by the puppet, then why is Fredbear such an important part of the game? Why is it the yellow eye speaking to us and not the puppet? And why are we always hearing the stuff the Fredbear plush tells Crying Child in FNAF 4 in FNAF World? Well, I have an answer. This game is all about freeing Crying Child's soul, right? Well, if that's the case, then wouldn't it make sense for whoever's trying to free him to take on the appearance or voice of his favorite plushie to get a bigger connection to his soul? After all, we know that spirits tend to forget details from their life, but the Fredbear plush seems to have been one of the major parts of Crying Child's memories, as well as being there in some sense in his dying moments. So if FNAF World is shaped around Crying Child, wouldn't it make sense for Charlie to take on the appearance and mannerisms of the plush? And hey, even if you don't believe that Charlie would imitate the Fredbear plush, you can always say she's the final speaker from FNAF 4, even though I think that's a bit messy. I do want to quickly touch on this as well, but until recently, I thought Cassidy was a pretty good contender for the role of the leaver of Breadcrumbs, or the one behind FNAF World. However, things have changed since the release of the brand new FNAF interactive book the week before, which, for those of you who don't know, places a real-life video game inside a novel where you control security guard Ralph, or Phone Guy, from FNAF 1. This book is crammed with lore, but I still haven't tried it yet as of recording this video, so trust me, I'll talk about it as soon as I get to read it. Anyway, the reason I say things have changed since then is because this book has an extremely interesting portrayal of Golden Freddy and the spirits possessing him. And yes, I say spirits, because this book makes it pretty clear there are 2 dead kids in this thing. Well, I guess that's a theory to add to the practically instantly debunked theories that I made that I was proud of pile. Anyway, the week before tells us that not only are there 2 spirits in Golden Freddy, but that one of them is aggressive and violent, while the other is calm and soothing to Ralph as he dies in the ending you find this in. Now, you might be thinking that the violent one should be Cassidy, while the calm one is Crying Child. But it's actually the other way around. In the book, you're given the option to type a different set of numbers into a phone. You can choose to type random numbers, or type in 1983. 1983. If you do, you hear the sound of a kid crying and telling someone to let go of them and that they don't want to go, as well as the sounds of bullies laughing, music, and concerned adults. You try to help the kid, but you soon realize you're over a decade too late. This isn't a live call, but rather a recording of a certain very important event. The bite of 83, or the first big bite. Anyway, as soon as Ralph is done listening to the recordings and the horrible stuff contained in it, Golden Freddy appears in his office and kills him out of rage. However, as Golden Freddy screams, a second feminine voice is heard, comforting Ralph and telling him that his daughter Coppelia, who Ralph worries about throughout the events of the book because of the animatronics, is safe, and Phone Guy closes his eyes and presumably dies at peace. So, in case you couldn't tell, this is a really weird ending. But we're not going to get into specifics on what means what. Rather, I want to focus on the fact that Cassidy, the feminine voice, isn't angry or vengeful like we always thought she was. Apart from practically instantly debunking the theory that Cassidy's the one William Afton shouldn't have killed, this also makes it highly unlikely she's the speaker in FNAF World, as that speaker is pretty aggressive at times. Oh, and that's another theory to add to the practically instantly debunked theories that I made that I was proud of pile. You know, if I had a nickel for each time. Anyway, Charlotte's voice lines in Ultimate Custom Night through the puppet and Lefty do seem to show she has a kind of passive-aggressive approach to William.
Seeing you powerless is like music to me. I don't hate you, but you need to stay out of my way.
So maybe that way of speaking carried over to FNAF World as well? So, now we've got a pretty good idea of the main plot of FNAF World. At Fezra's Fright during FNAF 3, the puppet shows up and decides to create a vessel in a spiritual safe place or sanctuary-esque realm, imitating the real-world Fazbear Company to attempt to piece together the fragmented memories of the missing children and allowing Happy State to happen during FNAF 3, finally letting the MCI victims move on after all those years. In the process, Charlotte and the vessel also free the FNAF 4 Crying Child, by taking on the form of his favorite plush toy and piecing together the clocks and the clock ending respectively. So, that's great and all, but we're not done here. Oh no, there's still a lot to cover, and one of those things is the mysterious desk man from FNAF World's Halloween update that Raven brought up earlier. So let's get right into it. If you need a quick refresher, once you beat all the minigames from FNAF World's second update, including Chica's Magic Rainbow, you'll meet a man at the desk. He'll tell you how he's created something that cannot be deactivated. Baby. After this, he presumably takes his own life, and Baby speaks to the player, telling them to remain in their seats. This is a very strange cutscene, and for a long time now, no one's had any sort of idea what this could mean. Be aware that this stuff can get a bit nasty, so let's get into specifics. First off, it's very obvious Baby is meant to be Circus Baby, and that this entire scene is alluding to Sister Location. Both Baby in this game and Circus Baby in Sister Location have the same voice actor and, voice, Heather Masters, and this update was released mere months before the latter game. Anyway, if the desk man tells us that he's the one who created Circus Baby, then that must mean he's either William Afton or Henry Emily, right? Well, not necessarily. You see, the desk man literally dies at the end of the minigame, whether it be of his own free will or Baby's. We know William dies of a spring lock failure and Henry dies in the FNAF 6 fire, so what could this be? Well, there's also the possibility that this desk man is none other than Scott Cawthon himself, venting his frustration about the first 4 FNAF games and talking about how he's finished Sister Location and how the franchise isn't gonna stop anytime soon, or that it's too late to deactivate it, with Baby obviously symbolizing the next big FNAF game or the future of Five Nights at Freddy's. But here's the thing. A lot of people are skeptical about this idea because Deskman literally dies in this ending, likely of his own will. Scott wouldn't put something like that in his own game, would he? Well, it wouldn't be the first time a joke in bad taste would make it into FNAF World. This infamous picture of Mangle hanging from the ceiling with the words "See what you've all done" appeared as a teaser for FNAF World before its release. Turns out the Mangle in this image is actually biting on the paddle ball it's iconic for using in the game, but between you and me, I think this allegory was 100% intentional. So, I don't think it's out of the question for this weird ending to be about Scott. Maybe it was more about his will to continue the original story dying, or something like that, as I don't see this ending being about William or Henry. Overall, this is just a really weird, creepy ending, and I'm not sure what to make of it. Now, I'll let Raven quickly take over again to explain another cryptic part of FNAF World, the aforementioned Old Man Consequences.
Alright, so Old Man Consequences, for simpler sake for this, I'm going to say OMC, is a very mysterious character. As covered previously, OMC can be found by traveling to the 4th sublevel in FNAF World, though I'm more here to give some ideas as to who this character could be and some brief descriptions as to why. Some of these are fan thoughts and some of them are some of my own. So the first one I bring up is some angel or demon. I've seen this one brought up before since, well, in later entries and by OMC's name, it gives consequences to people, whether it be for us the player or William later on, which is very similar to something that an angel or demon would do. Now there's some other possibilities I've seen brought up. One of these, for example, is Henry Emily. Since there are some similarities between the characters, one example is being there for the vengeful spirit to tell him to leave the demon to his demons in UCN. Another one is OMC paralleling Henry's sentiments with his line of, "Sorry to say you have gone too deep into the code. There is no way back out. My name is Old Man Consequences. Come have a seat, and let's fish for a while. You have nowhere else to go." Since Henry is also one to have a huge monologue similar to this in Pizza Sim, where there's no way back out of the location.
Into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection and misfortune. A labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize.
Next is one of my own theories I've been looking into and still am, so I want to see what you all could bring with this idea. My theory at the moment for OMC is that OMC could be Andrew. Now, the reason for this is because obviously Cassie and Andrew are very important characters, and if the books are in the games, remember that's an if, I feel like they wouldn't just not be there for later on, or just one of them. I feel that there's a possibility there's 2 UCNs, and later on, Andrew and Cassidy work together to stop the events of what's currently going on through Princess Quest. Though this still needs a lot of work and research to do, so let's see where it goes. Though there's also many different theories on OMC and who he could be or represent, from William's guilt to an agony being, and so many more that if I covered them all, we'd be here forever. So let me know your theories in the comments down below. Just remember to keep it kind, calm, respectful, and that's just a theory. Take it back, Withered.
Another interesting bit of lore from the Old Man Consequences ending that Raven didn't bring up is the image that you see after drowning in the lake. People have never been able to agree what this is. An angel? A person holding something in their arms? Well, I think I have the answer. In the files, this thing is labeled Happiest Day, as if the ever-present connections to that FNAF 3 minigame weren't already enough. But this isn't the Happiest Day we're familiar with. That minigame was all about completing the birthday party the 5 missing Freddy's kids never got to complete, thus giving them peace. In this image, if you look closely, it turns out there's 3 figures, one larger one holding its arms around 2 smaller ones. The flashing screen in front of them could be a TV. This is Crying Child's Happiest Day, his father William coming home and watching TV with him and his brother Michael. One big, happy family. We know that the Aftons have a very strong connection to TV. There's a television in Midnight Motorist, one in the FNAF 4 minigames, and Mike watches Immortal and the Restless from a TV in Sister Location. So I think this all lines up perfectly with what Bite Victim's happiest day would be. Him and his brother reunited thanks to their father, who's back from work for once. This is actually really sad, and I think goes to show how tragic the interconnected story of FNAF 4 and World really is. Crying Child is lost and he needs someone to give him his happiest day so he can finally find himself and rest. So, now that we've gone over some of the more important stuff, let's talk about some other interesting lore tidbits from FNAF World worth bringing up. One of these weird bits of lore actually comes from the universe end ending that I brought up earlier in this video. If you interact with Fredbear while having Fredbear as your party leader, which is impossible unless you customize your party to include Fredbear before you start the game, both Fredbears will explode and the game will end. This problem doesn't arise when you talk to other NPCs while using them as playable characters, so I think this ending is trying to tell us that there was only ever one Fredbear suit. For those of you who don't know, there's actually a very high chance that there was more than one Fredbear in operation before, during, or after FNAF 4 and the Bite of 83. You've got the Golden Freddy Cassidy gets stuffed into, the extra Golden Freddy suit we see in Into the Pit, and possibly Shadow Freddy or some other extra suit later on in the franchise. So this ending might be saying that only one of these Golden Freddys is the true original Fredbear that caused the bite, and that the others are just spare costumes or replacements like the ones we see on FNAF 4's 4th night in the backstage area. So I think that the Golden Freddy Cassidy got stuffed into is the culprit of the bite, while the withered Golden Freddy from FNAF 2 and Into the Pit are separate spare costumes that are just lying around, similar to Shadow Freddy. There's also some interesting lore in the Chipper's Revenge ending. Chipper is one of the main characters from Scott Cawthon's last game before the original Five Nights at Freddy's, Chipper and Sons of Lumberco. I won't go too in-depth on this game and the interesting content in it, but if you're curious to find out more, I highly recommend watching this video by a fellow FNAF YouTuber Laudadots about the game after this one. It's great fun and really well made. Anyway, to reach this ending, the player must first travel to the most northern area of Choppy's Woods, accessed through an area called Lily Gear Lake. If the player keeps traveling west, they will eventually come across an entrance to the mysterious mine area. On the lower left portion of the map, a small hallway can be seen jutting out from the mine. The player must go through a maze to reach this spot, and once you do, the fight against Chipper will begin. The boss himself, Chipper's Revenge, is quite powerful, capable of taking out even the highest level animatronics in your party with a single hit. In hard mode, he even has the 4th wall attack, which can defeat the entire party in one shot. When you beat Chipper, he complains about the fate of his franchise, wondering why people would rather be terrified by the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise over just playing his own. He vows to return one day to destroy everything before deactivating. Funnily enough, Chipper did technically return a short while later as El Chip from Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. However, he didn't really do anything to destroy the franchise's characters or reinstate his own series. Unless maybe he was the one who started the FNAF 6 fire, and not Henry? Look, I don't know, okay? I'm just going insane over here. Also, yes, he does break the 4th wall in his boss fight, and as I said earlier, he does have the 4th wall attack, which is actually pretty rare for a boss to have, so maybe he'll come back at some point down the line. Phew. Looks like I got through most of, if not all of the important stuff from FNAF World. So before we finish off, let's do a quick, simple recap of everything we learned in this game. The MCI kids die, Crying Child is also dead because of the Bite of 83, and Charlie is also dead because reasons, everyone is dead. However, Charlie decides to do something about it. When FNAF 3 happens and all the dead kids are in one place, Charlotte attempts to free their souls through the puppet and the mysterious soul energy floating around like crazy in Fazbear's Fright. She succeeds in freeing Crying Child by imitating his Fredbear plush through FNAF World and creating a hollow husk, the player, to free his soul and set up the happiest day minigames we see in FNAF 3. There's also a bunch of other weird stuff going on in the game that I discussed earlier that I have no idea why exists, to be honest, but yeah. Apart from that, that's essentially the main plot, story, and lore of FNAF World. Oh wow, I did it. Thanks for watching what is technically the longest analysis/theory video about Five Nights at Freddy's World available to watch on YouTube. I put quite a lot of work into this over the past week, and I'm super glad this video worked out. Thanks so much to Narrow Raven for joining me on this journey, and please remember to like, subscribe, but most importantly leave a comment with your opinion on this theory in the comments if you did, or if you didn't. Also be sure to check out Narrow Raven's channel. Remember to be respectful because it's all just a theory, but most importantly remember friends, keep on theorizing and never stop overthinking. This has been Woodward Circle, the Midnight Theorist.